Live. I have to do one more. You are already live, Mataji.
Okay, perfect.
Mhm.
Okay, so let me just share my whole desktop so that I can get access to whatever is showing. Okay, so let's get started. Let me get the slideshow up. Okay, so is it visible, Prabhu? It's all good?
Yes, yes, it is visible.
Perfect. Okay, so Hare Krishna and welcome. It's another wonderful Wednesday, and even more special, it is one of the Wednesdays in the month of Kartik, which is very, very dear to all of us. Kartik is the month where we try to increase our sadhana. We try to, try to get more quality rounds in and try to do a little bit more of whatever we do usually because it's a very auspicious month in which we can get more benefit by doing just the same thing with a little more heart and soul. So, getting the opportunity to sit with all of you and read this wonderful book again on this auspicious month is truly a blessing for me. Before we start, as you know, we've been doing the Bhagavad Gita. Every time I come, I try to do one chapter every class. So we've been moving from introduction, preface, first, second, third, fourth, and now we've come to the fifth chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. So hopefully, Krishna willing, we will keep going till we finish all of the chapters, and then we have this collection from which, if anybody needs, they can reference it to see what is in the Gita, what exactly the book holds, and just a way of reading from my angle. So I'm hoping it's of use to someone. Before we start any lecture, first I would like to thank you all for coming and then take the blessings and the guidance of my gurus. I would like to take the blessings of my Shiksha Guru, His Grace Shivas Pandit Prabhu, and my Diksha Guru, His Grace Vaisheshika Das Adhikari. Both of them are like lamps in my dark life, guiding me, holding me by the hand and walking me through this crazy dark maze that is the material world. Without their instructions, their patience, their tolerance, their compassion, I would not be here today to be able to share anything with any of you. So I am extremely indebted to both of them. My eternal gratitude to our wonderful Acharya, His Grace Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, in founding the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. He has given all of us a shelter, a place where we can come together and delve deep into the blessings of these wonderful spiritual books like the Bhagavad Gita and the Bhagavatam, and find solace and comfort in the camaraderie that we can all share as we head on our journey back home, back to Godhead. Of all the things that Srila Prabhupada has given us, this ISKCON is one really, really amazing blessing. And under the shelter of that, to be able to find Guru and to be able to find sadhus and then to be able to read Shastra just completes the whole triangle. So, my deepest gratitude to everyone. Now, we will start our classes with Mangalacharan prayers. These are prayers that we say to specific people in the parampara, to specific deities, and also it builds a kind of mood that helps us enter into any kind of spiritual knowledge with the right attitude and approach. So, Mangala Acharana prayers are the first we will start with. And then after that, we have a small snippet of a song. It's a really cute little bhajan that Srila Prabhupada loved a lot. It's Jai Radha Madhav. We will sing that and then we will head towards the topic for the day. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपा कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकं वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरो श्रीयुतपदकमलं श्रीगुरुं वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातां सहगना रघुनाथान्वितां तां सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gauratvise Namaha Panchatattvatmakam Krishnam Bhaktarupa Swarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakyam Namami Bhakta Shaktikam He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Deenabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Jayatam Surato Pangor Mama Manda Matirgati Matsarvasya Padambojau Radha Madana Mohanau Divya Vrindaranya Kalpadrumada Srimad Ratnangada Simhasanastau Srimad Radha Srila Govinda Devo Prishtyalibi Sevyamanau Smarami Shriman Rasa Rasarambi Vamsi Vata Tatastita Karshan Venu Swaner Gopir Gopinata Shriyestunaha Taptakanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So, the Jai Radha Madhav song is a very famous song in ISKCON because all of us use it. We do sing it just before we start any of our lectures, and it's in honor of Srila Prabhupada's deep love for this song, and also because it is a format we follow this procedure. Srila Prabhupada is very fond of this song. He sang it just before his lectures, and he would say that in this song there is a complete picture of Vrindavan. Everything is there. Srimati Radharani, Vrindavan Dham, Govardhan Hill, Yashoda, and all the cowherd boys. If you want to know the meaning of the song, it's here in the bottom. It says, Krishna is the lover of Radha. He displays many amorous pastimes in the groves of Vrindavan. He is the lover of the cowherd maidens of Braj, the holder of the great hill named Govardhan, the beloved son of Mother Yashoda, the delighter of the inhabitants of Raj, and he wanders in the forests along the banks of the river Yamuna. So I will be singing this without kartals to make sure that we don't have an issue with the recording, because sometimes the kartal kind of uh, messes up the recording, the sound levels. So I'm just going to go ahead without it. Jayu Radha Madhava Jayu Kunja Bihari Jayu Radha Madhava Jayu Kunja Bihari Jayo Gopijana Vallabha Jayo Girivara Dhari Jayo Girivara Dhari Jayo Radha Madhava Jayo Kunja Bihari Yashodanandana Brajajanaranja Yashodanandana Brajajanaranja Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jayo Radha Madhava, Jayo Kunja Bihari. Jayo Radha Madhava, Jayo Kunja Bihari. Jayo Gopijana Vallabha, Jayo Girivara Dari, Jayo Girivara Dari. Jayo Radha Madhava, Jayo Kunja Vihari. I know without the kartals and with me recovering from a cold, it may not have sounded the best, but I do sincerely pray that the Lord, His Lord and her Lordship would please bless us so that every effort and endeavor that we make towards reading Srila Prabhupada's translations and purports of the Bhagavad Gita give us fresh enlightenment and deeper understanding so that every effort removes the layers and brings us that one more step closer to the Lord and His instructions. Okay, so today's lecture, we're going to focus, we're going to do the whole fifth chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. We'll focus on a few select verses. I've pulled out a few places where the purports are extremely relishable, and then some little snippets of points that I found very interesting. The beauty of the Bhagavad Gita, which I find constantly, I'm always in awe of the fact that you always find something new when you open the Bhagavad Gita. No matter how many times you've read it, it's just amazing how you've missed something, or you didn't note that point, or that this was, how come I've never seen that before? And that's a very common feeling for us when we read the Bhagavad Gita, because um, the book reveals itself to us over time. We mellow, our understanding matures, and the book therefore we start to relish the book more and more. And the book therefore releases more and more understanding as we read it again and again. So this is not a book that we pick up, read, and put down and say, I'm done, find the next one. It is a way of life. It is a continuous exercise that only gets better and better. Let me first introduce the book to you. The Bhagavad Gita is, as the name suggests, Bhagavata Gita is a song of the Lord. It's a collection of verses that cover instructions that were given to Arjuna by his very close friend and at that point his guide and mentor, Sri Krishna, at the cusp of a great battle that was happening in the holy land of Kurukshetra about 5,000 years ago. Now, the verses that were given it seemed to be like a conversation. It's a conversation between two people, Arjuna and Krishna, and it's happening right in the middle of the battlefield where everybody's set and ready to have this huge, once in a uh, era battle. It's a huge battle, and it may seem like it's a one-on-one conversation, but the intention behind it was that these verses were given for the benefit of humanity at large. They have been saved and passed down from generation to generation in proper disciplic succession, and in that process, they are still as potent as they were on the day they were given out, and extremely valuable for us. It is the right guidance with which we can not only enrich and refocus our lives, but also bring in our lives a little more solace and hope, peace, and hopefully everlasting joy. So knowing the contents of the Gita is really important for us. When we ask Bhagavad Gita, I just explained to you what is the purpose of the Bhagavad Gita, why do we have it? And this was for humanity. It was meant to be passed down. Krishna explains in the first chapter that the parampara, the disciplic succession, was broken. And he's restarting it by giving it to Arjuna, and then the process continues from there on. And we look at it, we say, oh, I'm too young to read the Bhagavad Gita, or I'm too busy to read the Bhagavad Gita, or maybe it's not my stage of life yet to be reading these spiritual books, or maybe I should have a certain understanding before I open it. And we hear all these things, and we hear, oh, this is not the time to read it. Bhagavad Gita is only read like at this specific juncture. The truth is, the Bhagavad Gita can be read by anybody. We have very young children in our congregation who relish reading the Bhagavad Gita. We have elders. I remember a Mataji who used to read the whole Bhagavad Gita every day. That used to be her thing. 3.5 hours a day, she used to just read the Bhagavad Gita, recite all of it. And she did it all through her last phases of life. And it was just so inspiring. You need no qualification to read the Bhagavad Gita, but you do need an attitude. An attitude, what would be the attitude? Attitude would be one of open-mindedness. Srila Prabhupada just does request when we read the introduction that if we could just set our biases, our opinions, everything to a side, just for a little bit, and with an open mind read the Bhagavad Gita, then we will be eligible to understand, to take off that knowledge, which is there for all of us. Now, who can understand the Bhagavad Gita? Anybody with an open mind, anybody who's there to with a desire to understand will be able to get to understand it. But there is a certain there's a cheat sheet to the Bhagavad Gita to be able to understand the Bhagavad Gita really well. Your cheat sheet would be to hear it from somebody who has realized it themselves. One enduring benefit would be to find a guru and learn from them, because one who has assimilated this knowledge is in a much better position to, again, regurgitate, bring it back and give it to us. And it's just, that's usually the best way to take the knowledge. If not, then it's great to hear it from people who have relished it and read it again and again so that their understanding can transfer to you. But if you do not have the benefit of these things, you can still read the Bhagavad Gita, because never underestimate the value of the book that is written by somebody who has already had very deep understanding. So the author of the Bhagavad Gita is Sri Krishna, but the translator and the one who brought it to us is Divine Grace, Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. There's also an Acharya. And because we have his translations and purports, when we pick up the Bhagavad Gita, we already are in the association of an extremely qualified Vaishnava. So there should not be any problem in us understanding the Gita. But like I told you, it grows on you. So many times we feel like, I don't know if you feel that, I feel that way, that I've read it, but I got it, but I'm just this short. I think I got it. And then I realize maybe not. And that's the beauty of the Bhagavad Gita. So I hope you, as we go along, will fall in love with the Bhagavad Gita just like I did, and realize the extraordinary value of this wonderful, simple text. Some of the concepts and ideas we cover with the Bhagavad Gita are the concept of Vedic knowledge and what kind of knowledge it is. Now, these points that I've covered in this page are all in the introduction. Srila Prabhupada did a very thorough job of the introduction. So do not skip the introduction or the preface. They are your guides into the Gita itself. He covers a lot of the basic concepts in the introduction and in the preface, and it's really useful. So one thing he covers is the concept of Vedic knowledge. The other thing he covers is the idea of disciplic succession. What is it? The descending method of acquiring knowledge and the ascending method of acquiring knowledge. We covered all these in the previous classes. As I just explained, sometimes, the best way to approach it is with a guru. You are very lucky if you found one and he or she's able to walk you through. With all these concepts and ideas, at the end of the introduction, we get this beautiful collection of verses. There are 7 verses in the Padma Puran by Lord Shiva, who is glorifying the Gita to his wife, Parvati Devi. And these 7 verses are collectively called the Gita Mahatmya. And they're a beautiful collection towards the end of the introduction. Finally, Srila Prabhupada leaves us with a disciplic succession, order of disciplic succession. So if you see the earlier videos, you'll notice that I've put that up, and we've covered that Brahma, Madhava, Gaudiya Sampradaya, starting from the beginning all the way down to where we are now. So it's just wonderful to see where we come from. As always, the Bhagavad Gita covers 5 main subject matters. Ishvara, or the Supreme Lord, Jiva, who are us, the individual souls, Prakriti, which is material nature, Kala, which is time, and Karma, which are actions. And these topics are rotated in and out, and a deeper understanding of this is what we get as we flow through the chapters of the Bhagavad Gita. In the first chapter, as you remember, we are in the middle of a battle. So there's this introductory scene where Dhritarashtra and Sanjay are talking, and Sanjay shares his vision of the battlefield with Dhritarashtra, who could not come because he's blind. He stays back home and he wishes to know what's happening. And Sanjay has a special vision. So he's sharing what's happening in the battlefield with Dhritarashtra. And in the battlefield, we see this array of people. There's a discussion about who has prowess, who's stronger, which side is better, and then they blow conches, and there's this uh, whole preparedness for battle. At which point Arjuna comes up, as you see in the picture, very famous picture, which is our book. This is the older version of the Bhagavad Gita here, the blue color one. And in it, you can see how Krishna and Arjuna, their beautiful horses and a chariot, and there's Hanuman on the flag. They're coming up, getting ready for battle. And Arjuna makes a request. He says, I wish to see who are these people who have come to fight. I want to know who are these people and who are they who feel justified in this behavior. I would like to see them. Who wants to fight me? And then when he goes and sees, confusion and panic ensues because he sees his own extended family, his kith and kin, his friends, everybody who's of value to him is on the other side, ready to fight. And it triggers a lot of chaos in his mind. For a second, he's not sure what he's doing there. And he tells Krishna, this doesn't make sense. You know how sometimes everything seems okay and then suddenly it doesn't make sense? And he's right there at that stage where it made sense so far. I mean, there was a real reason here. We were here. And then suddenly everything goes blank because he sees his own family out there. And then he starts thinking about all the, all the nimittani viparitani, all the justification for not having this battle. He talks about, how he shouldn't kill his own clansmen, how it will cause irreligion, loss of family, unwanted progeny. So many reasons. And he says we should be compassionate. We shouldn't do this. I'd rather just die or just give it up. So he says, Krishna, I will not fight. Give me one good reason. Why am I fighting this battle? And from there, we move into chapter 2. Chapter 2 is a condensed collection of the Bhagavad Gita summary. It's a summary of the whole Bhagavad Gita. And in it, again, Krishna talks to Arjuna and says, what's happened? How have these impurities, come into your mind, Arjuna? And Arjuna again continues to say, this is not right. I see every benefit tainted with the blood of my family and my foe and my friends. And I do not want to do that. I don't understand anymore. So then at one point after confusion, he surrenders and he says, please instruct me. I'm drowning in grief and I do not know. So Krishna finally takes on the role from a friend to a guru or a guide. And at that point, the instructions start. And he starts explaining the concept of death and the concept of body and soul and the idea of soul and super soul and how, do we really die when we die? And if you believe that we do die and we are reborn again, that is still fine. If you believe we never die, and that is also okay, because he says any which way you look at it, this battle has to be fought because this is already predetermined, and you're only a pawn in the game. You're following a process. You're doing it, whether you do or not. I'm in charge, and it's already been decided. So this explanation he gives him, he covers a lot of points in chapter 2. So we can't cover all of them, but basically he talks about working without seeing the results, fighting without considering dualities, whether you win or lose. So he explains it materially, he explains it spiritually, and then he explains it Krishna consciously. And then he says, Arjuna, you have to fight. And a lot of questions and descriptions go on, text 54 onwards. It's a big collection, that chapter. And in the third chapter, he moves on to talking about what is prescribed duty, what is work that has to be done as sacrifice, why is it to be performed? And then, he talks about who is the doer, who is the real doer. Is it you or is it something else? He talks about how, sometimes we are driven to doing things, even though we are unwilling, as if engaged by force. He talks about lust, born of contact with material mode of passion, and that later transforms to wrath. So in this third chapter, we cover these concepts of work. We talk about start introduction idea of duty, prescribed duties, And then we go on to the latter part of the chapter where we talk about, how this attraction to the material world is the cause of, I could say, all our problems, and how we've been at it from time immemorial. So this desire to connect from the senses to the sense objects, this contact triggered by wanting to do or get something, this mode of passion later transfers into lust. And that lust is that desire or greed to have. And then from that lust, it transfers into wrath when we don't get what we want. So Krishna explains that lust, know thy enemy. So your lust is what is triggering all of these problems, and understand what are the different levels of it. And he says only by deliberate spiritual intelligence can we overcome this lust. So what we need to have is deliberate spiritual intelligence, DSI. Gurudev always says DSI. And what is deliberate spiritual intelligence? Krishna will expand on it in the coming chapters. Last time we did chapter 4. It was a bit of a heavy chapter. I remember we went through the whole thing and we talked about parampara. How, Arjuna says, how do you know? When you're not, because he's explaining the concept of disciplic succession and how this knowledge has been passed down. And Arjuna says, but you're my generation. How would you know? And he explains that, you may not, but I do. Being the super soul is aware of all other souls, but each soul is only limitedly aware of itself. And that too in that present birth. That's all that the person is able to remember, but it doesn't apply to the Lord. So he says, he talks about how he is different from other people, how the Supreme Lord is different from the Jiva, how his body is not material, and he descends for a purpose. He talks about the purpose, and he talks about how you can get to understand him better. In the process, he explains how people wanting things end up praying to demigods. So he talks about this, how some people approach him directly and then some people approach him indirectly. Ultimately, he is the cause of all causes, sarva karana karanam. But not everybody recognizes him as such. So even though he is the cause of everything that happens around you, sometimes we don't go to him, we go to somebody else. And that somebody else is like when we pray to the demigods. We go up to the demigods, and the demigods shipram he. So very fast, they will give you results. But those results are still coming from the Lord. They're coming from Krishna because ultimately it's coming from him. But you are approaching him in an indirect manner by going to the demigods. So he talks about how, people's needs, they need things, and that becomes very important. And this process of praying to demigods helps you acquire that faster. So we believe, so materialistically, the jiva starts to think the demigods are the right way to go, and they start praying to them. So he says that's just natural because our need is not in serving the Lord, but in acquiring material benefits. So he again in the 4th chapter, we end up covering this concept of action and inaction. He talks about the basics of when is somebody in action and when is somebody not in action, in inaction, so to speak. So he covers the basics of that, and then we go on to sacrifice. How everybody, and there's nothing that can be done without sacrifice. How there are different types of sacrifices, and we all end up sacrificing. But what is the ultimate purpose of a sacrifice, and why should we sacrifice? He talks about all this, wrapping up with the concept of guru and transcendental knowledge. I was just looking into the chapter before we started because I wanted to see if there's something here that we could cover. I really, really like how Prabhupada introduces a chapter. And then in the last part, in the last shloka, he will wrap up the chapter. And between the two, it's always such a pleasure. If you really want to know what happened, like we go to the blurb, or we go to the beginning, you can go to Prabhupada's beginning and end, and he will confidently have covered most of the concepts in that chapter. So here he talks about the whole idea. The last shloka in chapter 4 that we wrapped up, he says, therefore, the doubts which arise in your heart out of ignorance should be slashed by the weapon of knowledge. Armed with yoga, O Bharata, stand up and fight. And then Prabhupada is explaining that, if sacrifice of one's material possessions is not dovetailed for spiritual realization, then sacrifice becomes material. But one who sacrifices with a spiritual objective makes the perfect sacrifice. Spiritual activities are divided into two: understanding oneself and the truth regarding the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One who follows the path of the Bhagavad Gita can very easily understand these two important divisions of spiritual knowledge. For him, there is no difficulty in obtaining perfect knowledge of the self as a part and parcel of the Lord. So, in the beginning of this chapter, the transcendental activities of the Lord were discussed by the Lord himself. One who does not understand the instructions of the Gita is faithless and is to be considered to be misusing the fragmental independence awarded to him by the Lord. In spite of these such instructions, one who does not understand the real nature of the Lord as an eternal, blissful, all-knowing personality of Godhead is certainly fool number one. Ignorance can be removed by gradual acceptance of the principles of Krishna consciousness. I liked that because we are covering in this coming chapter, fifth chapter, we'll talk about ignorance and how this whole, this ignorance, this mode of ignorance in which we're sitting, it's so overwhelming. And Prabhupada is giving the answer in the previous chapter end. He says, it can be overcome, but it can be overcome by gradual acceptance of the principles of Krishna consciousness. As we accept and we start following a more regulated and more Krishna conscious lifestyle, these challenges that come up from this mode of ignorance can be overcome. So, sorry. Here we are, chapter 5. Karma Yoga, action in Krishna consciousness, or action in inaction. So let's see what new ideas are coming up in this chapter. So the fifth chapter, Karma Yoga, we split it down. So the first packet is the shlokas 1 to 7. And in the beginning, Krishna starts talking about Sankhya Yoga or Gyan Yoga, the yoga of meditating and studying things. So when we look at that, when we look at the text, let's start with the text, because I usually read the text translations and then we work with each translation. And Prabhupada's given a beautiful purport in text 1 that explains the whole flow process that brings us here. Arjuna starts off by saying, Arjuna said, "O Krishna, first of all, you ask me to renounce work. Then again, you recommend work with devotion. Now, will you kindly tell me definitely which of the two is more beneficial?" The personality of Godhead replied, "The renunciation of work and work in devotion are both good for liberation. But of the two, work in devotion service is better than renunciation of work. One who neither hates nor desires the fruits of his activities is known to be always renounced. Such a person, free from all dualities, easily overcomes material bondage and is completely liberated, O mighty armed Arjuna." So when we see text 1, he's asking, you're first telling me to work on the knowledge part, not get involved in other things. Then you're telling me, go out there and fight this battle. Fight it with understanding. He says, should I be working? Is it action or inaction? Which one should I be involved in? And his confusion starts because Prabhupada is explaining in the second chapter, preliminary knowledge of the soul and its entanglement in material body was explained. That is, soul and how it's stuck in the material body. What is this whole combination? How to get out of this material entanglement by Buddhi Yoga or devotional service is also explained. In the third chapter, it explains that a person who's situated on the platform of knowledge no longer has any duties to perform. So one who has understood his position, transcendental position, and himself, the Lord, and his relationship with the Lord. A person who has this deeper understanding can then follow the processes of Krishna consciousness, and he has no other duties because he's perfectly aligned in his path. Fourth chapter, Lord tells Arjuna, all kinds of sacrificial work culminate in knowledge. Everything that we do ends up in acquiring understanding, knowledge. However, at the end, he advises Arjuna, wake up and fight, being situated in perfect knowledge. Therefore, by simultaneously stressing the importance of work in devotion and inaction in knowledge, Krishna has perplexed Arjuna and confused his determination. Why is Arjuna confused? Because work and renunciation appear to him to be incompatible. If I'm renouncing, why am I working? And if I'm working, what have I renounced? Right? If I'm working for something, then I'm not letting go of anything. But if I'm going to gather knowledge, then I have to let go of all these interactions. so that I can gather my knowledge. These two paths don't seem to converge. And so Arjuna says, it doesn't make sense. First you tell me to do this, and then you tell me to do that other one. And now you're saying the other way. If you keep going back and forth, which one should I hold on to? It's a very fair question, if you ask me, because, Arjuna is not asking it for himself. Remember, he's asking it. This whole conversation is meant for Janahit, for the benefit of the public, for the benefit of everybody, everyone in general. So these questions are questions that will come up in our minds. And these great souls, they ask them so that we can benefit from the answer. Srila Prabhupada in the purport, when we are looking at Karma Yoga, he talks about this specific point. And then in the second text, where Krishna is explaining about both being good, there is this explanation in the purport. People are mad after sense gratification. They do not know that this present body, which is full of miseries, is a result of one's fruitive activities in the past. Although this body is temporary, it is always giving one trouble in many ways. Therefore, to act for sense gratification is not good. One is considered to be a failure in life as long as he makes no inquiry about his real identity. Atato Brahma Jigyasa. As long as he does not know his real identity, he has to work for fruitive results, for sense gratification. And as long as one is engrossed in the consciousness of sense gratification, one has to transmigrate, moving from one body to another. Although the mind may be engrossed in fruitive activities and influenced by ignorance, one must develop a love for devotional service to Vasudeva. Only then can one have the opportunity to get out of the bondage of material existence. This specific statement will repeat itself many times in the coming shlokas, because that's the whole sarams or essence of the chapter, is understanding this concept of working, but working in devotion. Therefore, jnana or knowledge that one is not this material body but a spirit soul is not sufficient for liberation, but it's certainly on the right path. One has to act in the status of a spirit soul, otherwise, there is no escape from material bondage. So, one must know one's position, and then one must act to enforce that status, to act in the right way. And that action in Krishna consciousness is what will help us escape material bondage. When we act in Krishna consciousness, it is not an action on the fruitive platform. When we act in Krishna consciousness, then we move to the spiritual platform. We don't stay. That action doesn't count as a material action. So when we go through this chapter, Srila Prabhupada talks about, he brings up Rupa Goswami's Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu to explain to us renunciation without Krishna consciousness is incomplete, and he gives the shloka, Prapanchikataya buddhya harisambandhi vastuna mumukshubhi parityago vairagyam phalgu katyate. When persons eager to achieve liberation renounce things related to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, thinking them to be material, their renunciation is called incomplete. So we should not renounce just for the sake of renunciation, but first we should seek to understand what it is that we are renouncing. One should understand that factually nothing belongs to anyone. Where is the question of renouncing? One who knows that everything is Krishna's property is always situated in renunciation. Since everything belongs to Krishna, everything should be employed in the service of Krishna. This perfect form of action in Krishna consciousness is far better than any amount of artificial renunciation by a sannyasi. So, most important thing that he explains is that the heart should be purified. Process of Krishna consciousness, as we serve in Krishna consciousness, it helps purify the heart. If we do not get the heart purified, then we cannot leave this fruitive platform. Without purifying the heart, we cannot leave this material platform. Just renunciation, therefore, is incomplete. And because it is incomplete, we always run the risk of falling down. We should not just renounce, we should choose to take act or do endeavor in Krishna consciousness. And that is why action in Krishna consciousness is better. There is no duality for a Krishna conscious person because everything that they do is for Krishna. And he has nothing to lament or aspire for because it was never for him in the first place. Thus, he becomes liberated. This is the concept in the first three texts. Text 4. Only the ignorant speak of devotional service, karma yoga, as being different from the analytical study of the material world, Sankhya. Those who are actually learned say, he who applies himself well to one of these paths achieves the results of both. Text 5. One who knows the position reached by means of analytical study can also be attained by devotional service, and who therefore sees analytical study and devotional service to be on the same level, sees things as they are. Yah pashyati sah pashyati. Merely renouncing all activities, yet not engaging in the devotional service of the Lord, cannot make one happy. But a thoughtful person engaged in devotional service can achieve the supreme without delay. Text 7. One who works in devotion, who is a pure soul, and who controls his mind and senses, is dear to everyone, and everyone is dear to him. Though always working, such a man is never entangled. So let's see the information that's getting covered. In shloka number 4, the aim of Sankhya Yoga is explained. Srila Prabhupada in the purports talks very nicely. I love this example that he gave. He says the purpose of Sankhya Yoga is to find the soul of existence. And the soul of the material universe is Krishna. The aim of Karma Yoga is to serve the super soul. That is to find our position in service. One process is in finding the tree. The other process is in watering the tree. Now, which is better? Finding the root of the tree or watering the root of the tree? Sankhya explains that the living entity is not a part of the material world, but the spiritual world. Karma Yoga engages the soul in service, connecting it to its constitutional position. Which of these two do you think is more effective? In Sankhya, one detaches from matter. In Karma Yoga, one attaches oneself to work in Krishna consciousness. Both of them are dealing with the same thing. They are one and the same. But like the image says, you need to know where the root is if you want to water it, right? So knowing where the root is very, very important. So knowledge is very important. We need to know where the roots are. But then with the knowledge, we should detach ourselves from the results because we have nothing to do with this. Everything is for Krishna, and we're serving in Krishna's name, in his favor, for him. And in that process, we end up watering the root because we know that taking care of Krishna is watering the root of the tree. So, first understanding and then acting in understanding. Which is better? Acting in understanding. But are they both in the same direction, heading towards the same goal? Yes. So, both are the same, but one is better than the other. And we've just talked about why. So, which is better? See, the sannyasis, both of them have worked very hard, many lifetimes, to come to the platform of Krishna consciousness. The Mayavadi sannyasis and the Vaishnava sannyasi. And Srila Prabhupada compares the two of them and explains what is that difference? What is that difference when they study Sankhya philosophy and when they do service in Krishna consciousness, devotional service? So he explains Mayavadi sannyasis, they study Sankhya philosophy. They study Vedanta philosophy with the Saririka Bhashya, which is their text. The Vaishnava sannyasis, they end up serving the Lord in Krishna consciousness, devotional service. They study Vedanta philosophy from the Srimad Bhagavatam. Now, Srimad Bhagavatam is the best book to use for Vedanta philosophy because it carries essence it carries the essence of Krishna consciousness. We have everything in that. When you are only dry reading, just philosophy and knowledge, there is a point in which, without any work, when you're detaching yourself and focusing on collecting knowledge, the process becomes very tedious, dry, and fatiguing. So the people in that process, they tend to start deviating. Either they take a break and try to read the Bhagavatam, but because their method of study is different, their approach to the Bhagavatam is not exactly helpful. The way they read the Bhagavatam doesn't help them advance the way the Vaishnavas read Srimad Bhagavatam. Another thing that they end up doing is that they start distracting themselves by thinking of doing philanthropic or altruistic activities. And that is not the right path because, as Srila Prabhupada explains later on, altruistic and philanthropic approaches are all materialistic. They are still in the material platform. Or third, because they have not found that taste and it's dry and it's overwhelming, sometimes they will fall down. So this risk is not there for the Vaishnava sannyasis because not only are they reading the Vedanta philosophy through the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the best way of understanding, imbibing that philosophy, we also end up having variegated services that keep them engaged and satisfied, and they have received a guaranteed result of going back home, back to Godhead, because in the process of devotional service, that is guaranteed. So when you see the Mayavadi sannyasis and Vaishnava sannyasis, you're able to notice the difference between this process of Sankhya Yoga and action in Krishna consciousness, and why one is so much better than the other. With mind fixed on Krishna and no chance to deviate, a person of controlled senses cannot be offensive to anyone. And this is a point that's being explained in the shlokas. He says, when you are fixed on Krishna consciousness, you have a certain process. You are listening to only certain things, you're eating certain things, you're seeing only certain things, your senses are all controlled. And they are kept in a certain way that allows no chance to deviate. And when your senses are controlled in that manner, there is really no way anybody can cause offense, because everything that they do, they are doing in the service of the Lord. So there is no chance that, because there's nothing in it for them, there's very little chance that they would be able to offend anybody else. Let me see. Yeah. Up to that, we've studied. We've come all the way down to Shloka 7. We have two more parts. One is Shlokas 8 to 17, and then we have 18 all the way down to 29. So the second part of this chapter is 8 to 17, in which Srila Prabhupada had some really nice purports, but the whole idea of 8 to 17, it talks about purifying activities. So this chapter is all about understanding what is action in Krishna consciousness. What kind of work do we do in this kind of situation, and how it helps us overcome these challenges of ignorance and material motivations, and helps us focus on the Supreme, helps us connect and take shelter and refuge of the Supreme. Text 8 and 9. A person in divine consciousness, although engaged in seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, eating, moving about, sleeping and breathing, always knows within himself that he actually does nothing at all. Because while speaking, evacuating, receiving, or opening or closing of his eyes, he always knows that only the material senses are engaged with their objects, and that he is aloof from them. This is a shloka that's very famous. We end up reading it many times. So I did mark that out so that we could read it. Naiva kinchit karomiti yukto manyeta tattvavit pashyan shrinvan sprishan jigran ashnan gachan swapan swashan pralapan visrajan grihnan unmisham nimisham api indriyan indriyarteshu vartanta iti dharayan. He says, so that is what it says. And he speaks about this idea that a person in Krishna consciousness is pure in his existence, and therefore he has nothing to do with anything related to work. So if you look at the slide that I had put up earlier, it speaks about the 5 immediate and remote causes of work. So there are 5 causes of work. One is the doer, the person who does the work. The second is the work itself that we are doing, situation in which the work is being done, the effort that is involved in doing the work, and the end result, or the fortune that comes from that effort, that endeavor. So all of this, it has nothing to do with the person who's acting in Krishna consciousness, because, and we are reiterating again and again, they are working for the Lord, not for themselves. So whatever comes from that effort goes to the Lord. One who knows perfectly well that everything belongs to Krishna, and that he is the proprietor of everything, and that therefore everything is engaged in the service of the Lord, naturally has nothing to do with the results of his activities, whether virtuous or sinful. Even one's material body, being a gift of the Lord for carrying out a particular type of action, can be engaged in Krishna consciousness. It is then beyond contamination by sinful reactions, exactly as a lotus leaf that remaining in the water is still not wet. So, patra, I think pushpam ivambasa. So it talks about the lotus leaf, how it is, the water cannot permeate a lotus leaf, right? It is, I forget the word. So the water that drops on a lotus leaf just slips off it. It doesn't attach itself to the leaf at all. And in that way, when a person who is in clear Krishna consciousness does any activity, none of the effect of that action attaches to him. So he's basically working, but he's not working. It's inaction in action. Do you understand the concept now? So the whole idea of action and inaction and inaction and action is simply that when you are doing something, by doing something in the service of the Lord, for the pleasure of the Lord, with the Lord in mind, you don't end up gathering any of the, you don't gather anything from that action because you don't benefit and you don't lose. But if you choose to renounce everything and you sit away, by not doing anything, you're still making a choice and you're connected because of that. So in that inaction, there is action. And that concept takes a long time for us to slowly understand. So it's worth revisiting these concepts again and again, especially reading them through Srila Prabhupada's purports. I recommend is the best way to understand them because Srila Prabhupada is so much better than us. Like Srila Prabhupada reminds us, what can I teach? What can I say? But if you would just read a page of Srila Prabhupada's purports, I'm sure he would be able to explain this to you in so much better fashion. So the whole idea, again and again, being reiterated in this chapter is that when one acts in Krishna consciousness with satisfaction of the senses of Krishna, any action, whether of the body, mind, intelligence, or even the senses, is purified of material contamination. There are no material reactions resulting from such activities of a Krishna conscious person, and these such purified activities are called sad achar, or actions in Krishna consciousness. So when we go through these chapters, these are some of the benefits that we get in reading them. There we go. So we did that. We read we were here, 8 to 9. We read this, and we're moving on to text number 10. One who performs his duty without attachment, surrenders the result onto the Supreme Lord, is unaffected by sinful action, as a lotus leaf is untouched by water. The yogis, abandoning attachment, act with body, mind, and intelligence, and even with the senses, only for the purpose of purification. The steadily devoted soul attains unadulterated peace because he offers the result of all his activities to me. Whereas a person who is not in union with the divine, who is greedy for the fruits of his labor, becomes entangled. So when we talk about these 10, 11, and 12 verses, we have Srila Prabhupada talking to us about the Isho Vasyamidam Sarvam, which is the Isho shloka that covers this concept. Let me give you the translation in English. In the Ishopanishad, it is said that everything is related to the Supreme Brahman or Krishna. Everything belongs to him only. One who knows this perfectly well, that everything belongs to Krishna, and that he is the proprietor of everything, naturally has nothing to do with the things around him. Everything is to be engaged in the service of the Lord, and none of the results of these activities, whether virtuous or sinful, attach to him. Even one's material body, same thing that I just read, being a gift used in the purpose of Krishna consciousness, ends up uncontaminated. So with that comes the example of the water on lotus leaf. To be and yet not to be. Conclusion is that a person in Krishna consciousness acts on the concept of material body and senses. Oh, hold on. I think I messed up. The conclusion is that a person without Krishna consciousness acts according to the concept of the material body and senses, but a person in Krishna consciousness acts according to knowledge that the body is the property of Krishna and therefore should be engaged in the service of Krishna. So this sadachar, these purified activities, is what he's talking about in text 11. And there he brings up Rupa Goswami's Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Again, we're coming back to Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Here it says, Ihar yasya harer dasye karmana manasagira nikhilasvi api avastastu jivan mukta sa uchyate. So a person acting in Krishna consciousness with his body, mind, intelligence, and words is a liberated person even within the material world, although he may be engaged in many so-called material activities. So today you will notice that I'm just repeating myself again and again. It's not on purpose. It just basically it's just the concept that Krishna is reiterating the concept of service to the Lord. He's explaining how that is the best path, how it's quick, and how it's very effective, and it helps you cross over the material platform, and then it helps you detach yourself from papa punya, which is benefit and loss, and then coming out of that stand, we become purified. We are eligible for liberation. And this is again reiterated in the purports by Srila Prabhupada with different examples. So the difference between a person in Krishna consciousness and a person in bodily consciousness is that the former is attached to Krishna, whereas the latter is attached to the results of his activities. So I remember reading when I was new and I didn't know what the Bhagavad Gita was. I used to always see these verses put up everywhere. Karam kar phal ki ichha mat kar. Do the work, do not be attached to the result. And it used to be this, they used to chip it out of the Bhagavad Gita and put it up there like this quotable quote out. And I couldn't understand that if I did some work, why I should not benefit from it. Why should I detach myself from the result? If I'm putting an effort, then the result is mine, right? Because it was so chipped out. It wasn't explained at all. It was just cut and put. I could never understand the context, and I asked so many people growing up, and nobody could explain it to me. Now, with the ability to read the Bhagavad Gita and reading through all this, that shloka comes back to mind. That Hindi translation comes back to mind because that is exactly what we're trying to understand in chapter 5. How we detach ourselves from the result and we serve the Lord in our actions. So a steadily devoted soul attains unadulterated peace because he offers the results of activities to me. The person in bodily consciousness is attached to Krishna, and a person who is not in body consciousness, who is Krishna consciousness, the person who is not in bodily consciousness is attached to Krishna, and the person who is in bodily consciousness is attached to results. And this is the main concept of this, understanding what we are attached to. One who is entangled in profit calculation for sense gratification cannot have peace. This is the secret of Krishna consciousness. Realization that there is no existence besides Krishna is the platform of peace and fearlessness. Such a nice topic. It was one of the topics that our children covered in one of our Gita champions, I remember. And one of the children was talking about how no Krishna, no peace. No Krishna, no peace. It sounds exactly the same, but it's KNOW. If you know Krishna, then you will know peace. But without Krishna, no Krishna, you will have no peace. And that comes back to me every time that I get to this chapter because it's so true. First, we should understand the root, then we must water the root. Both are necessary. Our effort to understand our connection with the Lord, effort to understand ourselves, the Supreme Lord, and our connection with the Lord is our most important effort. Because in understanding that, we can then get to the point of understanding what is our duty, what is our responsibility. Our responsibility is to serve the Lord. And in doing that, we become elevated. So, text 13. When the embodied living being controls his nature and mentally renounces all actions, he resides happily in the city of 9 gates, neither working nor causing work to be done. So, this city of 9 gates is an expression of the physical body. It turns up even in the Srimad Bhagavatam in different stories. So, these 9 gates, Navadware. So, they are the eyes, ears, nostrils, genitals. We have all these openings through which air passes in and out, and it's called the city of 9 gates, and the soul resides in this. And many times it gets confused about what exactly it's doing here and how it ended up here. So I mark this text because it's a nice text to read. Sarvakarmani manasa sanyasyaste sukham vasi navadvare pure dehi naiva kurvanna karayan. So in this, Srila Prabhupada talks about the 9 gates. He says, Navadvare pure dehi hamso lelayate bahi vasi sarvasya lokasya sthavarasya charasya cha. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is living within the body of a living entity, is the controller of all living entities all over the universe. The body consisting of 9 gates, here it's giving the 9 gates, 2 eyes, 2 nostrils, 2 ears, 1 mouth, anus, and genitals. This is the body of the 9 gates. The living entity in his conditioned state identifies himself with the body. But when he identifies himself with the Lord within himself, he becomes just as free as the Lord, even while in the body. What a beautiful explanation. Remember the story? Remember, we always brought the analogy of the 2 birds sitting on a tree, where one bird is the Lord, he's always looking at me, and the other is me, the Jiva, who's always looking to eat the fruits on the tree, but never bother to look at the bird that's sitting there with him. And how, if we could make that connection and understand, then the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is there living with us, who is with us and yet not attached to anything around us. There's nothing material about the Lord. He's there to enable us. He's there to help us execute our desires. But if we could just stop desiring so many other things and understanding that our greatest happiness lies in serving Him, then just as the Lord is free, we will also be freed. When we identify ourselves with the Lord Himself, we become just as free as the Lord. That's such a beautiful purport. The embodied spirit, master of the city of his body, does not create activities, nor does he induce people to act, nor does he create the fruits of action. All this is enacted by the modes of material nature. So in this, we see that the jiva thinks that, I'm the one who's doing it. This is all by me. I will do this, this will happen, and then because of that, I will get this much. And this I, considering themselves the master, actually is not true. It is explained here in text 14, and the text goes, Na kartravyam na karmani lokasya srijati prabhu na karma phala samyogam svabhavastu pravartate. It says, in the purport, he's explaining the living entity. When we get to the 7th chapter, is one of the energies of the natures of the Supreme Lord. So he's talking about how there's inferior energy and then superior energy, and how the living entity is also one of those energies. The temporary body or material dwelling place that he gets is because of his various activities. It's a result of his various activities that he's been doing. And this has been going on from time immemorial. We've been constantly doing this. And in this process of having these, because we believe that we are this body and then we are doing things, we end up getting connected, accountable for all the activities that are happening while we are in this body. And as a result of it, we end up transmigrating from body to body, getting a new body based on what we did with the previous body. So as soon as a living entity becomes aloof from the activities of the body, he understands that I'm actually not a part of this. I'm being pushed and pulled around by the three modes. As long as he realizes that, as long as he's in the city of the body, if he can understand that he's actually neither its proprietor nor the controller, and that he's simply in the midst of a material ocean struggling for existence, and he's being tossed around in the waves of the ocean, he has no control over them, then he will realize his best solution is to get out of the water by transcendental Krishna consciousness, and that will save him from all the turmoil. So this is another example Prabhupada is giving of how you think you're in charge, but actually you're just being tossed around. Material nature and all your previous activities, everything, there's so many things impacting you. You really aren't in control. So then why are we trying to hold the rudder of the ship and trying to control it somehow when we know that the best solution is to get out of the water? Let's not stay here and fight this fight anymore, If there's a better option, we should hold on to it with all our might and get ourselves out. Nor does the Supreme Lord assume anyone's sinful or pious activities. Embodied beings, however, are bewildered because of the ignorance which covers their real knowledge. So text 15, Srila Prabhupada explains this. So one is that we don't have any control of this body or the activities here. Already these things have been put into place because of earlier behavior patterns, things that we did, activities we've done, and then this body has come because of that. And from there, because we still connect ourselves to this material body, we are continuing this process of creating more actions, more results. And in this process, it is ongoing transaction. We transmigrate. The Supreme Lord doesn't assume anyone's sinful or pious activities. So in text 15, if you take a look, in the purport, I marked out the purport because I wanted the word ignorance. And I wanted to see what is that ignorance that is covering us and covering our real knowledge. So it says in 15, the text talks about two things. One is Vibhu. Vibhu means the Supreme Lord, who's full of knowledge. He's unlimited with knowledge, riches, strength, fame, beauty, and renunciation, all six. And he's always satisfied in himself, undisturbed by sinful or pious activities. So for him, he is Vibhu. But we are Anu, atomic, super small. We're living entities. Vibhu is omniscient. But the living entity who's Anu has only a certain amount of ability to understand and influence. So our desire to do something is actually being fulfilled by the Lord. The omnipotent Lord is the one who is helping us fulfill our desires. But just because he's helping us fulfill our desires doesn't mean that he's taking on any of our sinful or pious activities. We have to understand the Lord is never responsible for the actions and reactions of a particular situation which may be desired. Being in a bewildered condition, therefore, The embodied soul identifies himself with the circumstantial material body and becomes subjected to the temporary misery and happiness of life. The Lord is a constant companion of the living entity as a Paramatma, super soul. He understands the desires, just as one can smell the flavor of a flower by being near it. Desire is a subtle form of conditioning for the living entity. The Lord fulfills his desire as he deserves. So, whatever is our proportion, whatever we deserve to receive, that portion the Lord fulfills. And that's where the statement, man proposes, God disposes, arises. The individual is therefore not omnipotent in fulfilling his desires. The Lord can fulfill all desires. The Lord is neutral, but he does not interfere with the desires of the minute independent entities. However, when one desires Krishna, when your desires dovetail to the Lord, when one desires Krishna, Lord takes special care and encourages one to desire in such a way that one can attain to him and be eternally happy. So, this is what Srila Prabhupada is explaining in text 15. He says, this ignorance, this lack of understanding is what is covering us up. And if we can overcome that, then we will get our real knowledge. Text 16. When, however, one is enlightened with the knowledge by which nescience is destroyed, then his knowledge reveals everything, just as the sun lights up everything at daytime. So, the value of knowledge is highlighted in these verses. It's very important to know the root of the tree. When one's intelligence, mind, faith, and refuge, intelligence, mind, faith, and refuge are all fixed in the Supreme, then one becomes fully cleansed of misgivings through complete knowledge and thus proceeds straight on to the path of liberation. This is so simple and so straightforward, these shlokas. In the purports, Srila Prabhupada tends to expand and elaborate more on them, but these shlokas in themselves are so beautiful and they follow in such a nice pattern. Srila Prabhupada wraps up talking about the supreme reality or Parat Tattva. Paratattva, or supreme reality, who is understood by the knowers of the Supreme as Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. That is the version of all Vedic literature. There is nothing more than that. The Lord says, Matta Parataram Nanyat Kinchit Asti Dhananjaya. Impersonal Brahman is also supported by Krishna. So everything, there's nothing greater than Krishna. He exists in three forms. He exists in the forms of Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. But it's all him. Ultimately, it's just him. So it's a Krishna conscious person can thoroughly understand that there is duality in Krishna, and equipped with such transcendental knowledge, one can make steady progress on the path of liberation. Duality in the sense of he exists in different versions, he exists simultaneously with identity and individuality. And that's what Srila Prabhupada is explaining here. He's explaining that in Shloka 17. He talks about how understanding the Lord is very important. Let's see the last batch, 18 to 29. 18 to 29 runs through the shlokas. It starts off with shloka 18, which is a very famous shloka. It talks about how a person, so now we talked about acquiring knowledge, how important it is to acquire knowledge. A person who has acquired this knowledge, what are the qualities? What are his benefits? What kind of things, Let's talk a little bit more about him or her. So it comes down to text 18. Text 18, let me get to the shloka. Vidya Vinaya Sampanne Brahmane Gavihastini Sunichaiva Swapake cha Pandita Samadarshina. So we're looking at this shloka. It comes into translation. The humble sages, by virtue of true knowledge, see with equal vision a learned and gentle Brahmana, cow, an elephant, a dog, and a dog eater. So for him, they are all the same. So a Krishna conscious person doesn't make distinctions. He doesn't look at species or caste. He doesn't see caste. It could be a Brahmana or you could be an outcast. You could be a cow, elephant, or dog, or a human. So you could be any species. For them, what is the knowledge by which he sees with equal vision is the question. Because he sees that inside all of these forms, the super soul is there. He's there in all these bodies. He doesn't differentiate either. He's present in everyone's heart. So if with an understanding of the Supreme comes real knowledge. As far as the bodies are concerned in different castes, different species, the Lord is equally kind to everyone because he treats every living being as a friend. Yet he himself He maintains himself as Paramatma regardless of the circumstance of living entities. Therefore, he is present in all these bodies. The bodies are material productions of different modes of material nature, but the soul and supersoul are of the same spiritual quality. Do you understand? The wrapper may be material, but the inside substance, the soul and supersoul, both are spiritual. A Krishna conscious person with this full knowledge, therefore, with his learned knowledge, has equal vision. He sees there's a soul in every one of these things, and therefore, in every one of these forms, and therefore, he treats them all the same. And that's the point Srila Prabhupada brings out in this text 18. 19. Those whose minds are established in sameness and equanimity have already conquered the conditions of birth and death. They are flawless like Brahman, and thus they are already situated in Brahman. A person who neither rejoices upon achieving something pleasant nor laments upon obtaining something unpleasant, who is self-intelligent, who is unbewildered, and who knows the science of God is already situated in transcendence. So here we see, let me finish 21. Such a liberated person is not attracted to material sense pleasure, but is always in trance, enjoying the pleasure within. In this way, the self-realized person enjoys unlimited happiness, for he's concentrated on the Supreme. So he's describing the qualities of a person with that kind of understanding. Person with true knowledge, he treats everybody the same because he understands that the outer covering is material, but the inside, they're all the same. The spiritual quality is the same. Minds who have this established sameness, right? Equanimity of mind is a sign of self-realization. I underlined equanimity to highlight that point. Prabhupada says it is a sign of self-realization. Those who have actually attained to such a state should be considered to have conquered material conditions, basically birth and death. That means they are no longer identifying with the body. Therefore, he is no longer subject to take birth in the material world, but can enter the spiritual sky after his death if he has achieved this equanimity. That's what Srila Prabhupada is trying to explain in that text. With text 21, he talks about how person is not attracted to material sense pleasure, and he's always enjoying the pleasure within. In this, Srila Prabhupada brings out Yamunacharya's purport, in which Yamunacharya gives this beautiful verse. He says, Yad avadhi mamachet Krishna padara vinde, nava rasa dhamni udyatam rantum asit. Tad avadhi bata nari sangame smaryamane bhavati mukha vikara sustu nistivanam cha. Since I have been engaged in the transcendental loving service of Krishna, realizing ever new pleasure in him, whenever I think of sex pleasure, I spit at the thought and my lips curl with distaste. So in this expression by Yamunacharya explains to us how a person in Krishna consciousness is so absorbed in the loving service of the Lord that he loses his taste for material sense pleasure altogether. In the material world, the highest pleasure in terms of sense pleasure is sex pleasure. So Srila Prabhupada says this is a test in spiritual realization. This overcoming this desire. Spiritual realization and sex pleasure, says Srila Prabhupada, go ill together. A Krishna conscious person is not attracted to any kind of sense pleasure due to his liberated soul. He gives this example here and talks about why a person who is in Krishna consciousness, therefore, does not want to enjoy any of these pleasures because he is pretty satisfied and happy with the pleasure he derives from his Krishna conscious service. An intelligent person does not take part in the sources of misery which are due to contact with the material senses. O son of Kunti, such pleasures have a beginning and an end, and so the wise man does not delight in them. In this, Srila Prabhupada picks the Srimad Bhagavatam Rishabhadev instruction to his sons, 551, in which he says, Nayam deho deha bhajam na draloke, kashtan kaman arhate vid bhujam ye, tapo divyam putrakayena sattvam, sudhyet yasmad brahma saukyam tvanantam. My dear sons, this is Rishabhadev instructing his sons. There is no reason for us to labor very hard for sense pleasure while in this human form of life. Such pleasures are available to the stool eaters or hogs. Even they get this pleasure. Rather, you should undergo penances in this life by which your existence will be purified, and as a result, you will be able to enjoy unlimited transcendental bliss. So he's explaining how if we go towards these sources of energy of misery that is being highlighted in text 22, right? The sources of misery. Because why are they sources of misery? Because once we come in contact with material senses and we try to enjoy the pleasure, we get caught. We end up creating this link. This we end up having material connections, and then that triggers the new body. It starts off in our process of transmigration. We start moving from body to body because our actions, the resultant repercussions of our actions, trigger a creation of a new body. And in that way, we keep moving. So we never get out. Instead, he says, don't do this. Choose penance and break out of this cycle. Don't delight in this temporary, so-called happiness. Text 23. Before giving up this body, if one is able to tolerate the urges of the material senses and check the force of desire and anger, he is well situated and is happy in this world. So this is the definition of a Goswami. This Goswami comes up in another chapter too. So Goswami, one who is in control. Swami is the controller of the senses. So one who is in control of his senses. If you have this understanding, this transcendental knowledge, and then you're working in Krishna consciousness, in this regulated life, in this process where there are no distractions, where our thoughts, actions, our efforts, everything is towards the Lord and for the Lord's benefit, then there is no question of being unhappy. He is well situated and he's happy in this world. And that is what Srila Prabhupada is covering. So, text number 24, one whose happiness is within, who's active and rejoices within, and whose aim is inward, is actually the perfect mystic. He is liberated in the Supreme and ultimately he attains the Supreme. So Brahma Bhuta Prasannatma, na sochati na kangshati. So Brahma Bhuta, this is the state of Brahma Bhuta, where no longer does a person desire external material happiness. This arises when we follow this process. A liberated person enjoys happiness by factual experience. He can therefore sit silently at any place and enjoy the activities of life from within. Such a liberated person no longer desires external material happiness. Text 25. Those who are beyond the dualities that arise from doubts, whose minds are engaged within, who are always busy working for the welfare of all living beings, and who are free, and who are free from all sins, achieve liberation in the Supreme. So here, Srila Prabhupada talks about people who are engaged in this activity, they will automatically achieve liberation. That's what he's bringing up here. Those who are free from all sins, because there is no papa or punya, they're not attached to the result. For them, they can achieve liberation in the Supreme. Srila Prabhupada, in this purport, he talks about the highest welfare work. He says first class welfare work cannot be done without being liberated in the Supreme. A Krishna conscious person has no doubt about the supremacy of Krishna. He has no doubt because he's completely freed from all sins. This is a state of divine love. To act to revive this kind of consciousness within the entire human society is the highest welfare work. If we are not engaged in helping people becoming liberated, then we are not in the process of really good welfare activities. A person engaged only in ministering to the physical welfare of human society cannot factually help anyone. Remember, we talked about that, how Mayavadi philosophers, in the middle of this chapter, we explained how they so dry and so arid that that's this just gathering of knowledge without action, not any activity that connects. At some point, they turn to altruism. They turn to philanthropy, right? And Prabhupada's explaining again here. Now we are in the 26th verse. And 25th one, he's explained again. He says, engaging only in ministering to the physical welfare of human society cannot factually help anyone. Temporary relief of the external body and mind is not satisfactory. The real cause of one's difficulties and hardship can be found in one's forgetfulness of his relationship with the Supreme. When his consciousness, when he is conscious of his relationship, when we waken that, then he can be liberated and he will escape this material tabernacle. He uses the word tabernacle, this little space in which we are tied down. Tabernacle, I went and looked for it. It's a tent in which people hold prayer meetings. It's Jewish. But the concept of being caught in a space, a tabernacle, he says, to get out of the material tabernacle, first you should help them with this knowledge. Give them this knowledge and understanding. That is real welfare work. Text 26. Those who are free from anger and all material desires, who are self-realized, self-disciplined, and constantly endeavoring for perfection, are assured of liberation in the Supreme in the very near future. So in this text, I found a very interesting example. So I was holding on to that. Let's see the text. Kamakrodha vimuktanam yatinam yatachetasam abhito brahma nirvanam vartate viditamanam. So those who are free from anger and all material desires, who are self-realized, self-disciplined, constantly endeavoring for perfection, are assured of liberation in the Supreme in the very near future. And here, Prabhupada brings out the Bhagavatam, Yat Pada Pankaja Palasa Vilasa Bhaktya Karma Shayan Ratitam Udkritayanti Santa Tadvan Narittamatayo Yatayo Piruddha Sroto Ganastam Aranam Bhajavasudevam. Just try to worship in devotional service Vasudeva, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Even great sages are not able to control the forces of the senses as effectively as those who are engaged in transcendental bliss by serving the lotus feet of the Lord, uprooting the deep-grown desire for fruitive activities. Remember, this is like from time immemorial, we are attached to fruitive activities. So it's very difficult to overcome it just on our own. But if we choose this process of Krishna consciousness and we accept these regulations and we follow through, it is a process of cleansing. The heart will be purified. In the process of purification of the heart, then we will be able to get that clarity, that realization, and then we will attain the transcendental service by which we will cross over the material level and come to the spiritual platform. So he explains this. This was the example I wanted to share because I didn't notice it last times when I was reading. And then I was very impressed that, oh, wow. So here's one. It says, to cite an analogous example of this, Darshana Dhyana Samsparsher Matsya Kurma Vihangama Swani Apatyani Pushnanti Tathaham Api Padmaja. By vision, by meditation, and by touch only do the fish, the tortoise, and the birds maintain their offspring. Similarly to I also, O Padmaja. So this example that comes here, I'm not sure where it comes from. I couldn't track down the source, but it's there in the Bhagavad Gita, so it is an official source. The fish brings up its offspring simply by looking at them. And that made me think, actually, what do fish do in the water? Because I've never quite noticed it, and I was very surprised. Fish bring up its offspring simply by looking at them. The tortoise brings up its offspring simply by meditation. The eggs of the tortoise are laid on land, and the tortoise meditates on the eggs while in the water. Similarly, the devotee in Krishna consciousness, although far away from the Lord's abode, can elevate himself to that abode simply by thinking of him constantly. So this question, right, of constantly thinking of the Lord by engagement in Krishna consciousness, by serving the Lord, by using all his senses in service of the Lord, he ends up thinking of the Lord constantly. By thinking of the Lord constantly, even though he's far away, he can elevate himself. He does not feel the pangs of material miseries. This state of life is called Brahma Nirvana, or the absence of material miseries due to being constantly immersed in the Supreme. That was an interesting example that I wanted to share. Down to the last two texts, text 27, 28. Shutting out all external sense objects, keeping the eyes and visions concentrated between the two eyebrows, suspending the inward and outward breaths within the nostrils, and thus controlling the mind, senses, and intelligence, the transcendentalist, aiming at liberation, becomes free from desire, fear, and anger. One who is always in this state is certainly liberated. So this is a physical example of how to attain that state. This is a yogic example where you sit in a certain pose, your focus is in a certain way. And Srila Prabhupada, I think, if I remember correctly, he brought up in this, he was talking about the exact position. He's talking about Ashtanga Yoga, the eightfold process in which you have Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana, and Samadhi. So in the sixth chapter, this comes up when we go to Dhyan Yoga, but he's introducing it here. And he talks about how when you're sitting there, I like this point that he brought up. He said, when you're sitting there, you bring your eyes, keep the vision of the eyes between the two eyebrows and concentrate on the tip of the nose with half closed eyelids. And Prabhupada says, there's no benefit in closing the eyes altogether because then there's every chance of you falling asleep. Nor is there benefit in opening the eyes completely, because there is the hazard of being attracted by sense objects. Therefore, the eyes must be partially closed, focused on the tip of the nose, and then in that process, they meditate. So that was very interesting. I didn't note that. The breathing movement is restrained within the nostrils by neutralizing the up and down air. And by practicing such yoga, one is able to gain control over the senses. And then he ends up by saying, a Krishna conscious person, however, and this beautiful statement comes again and again in the Bhagavad Gita. It says, all this shrama eva hi kevalam. Sometimes I feel that sentence applies so much effort. Why? He says, a Krishna conscious person, however, being always engaged in devotional service, does not risk losing his senses to some other engagement. This is a better way of controlling the senses than by the Ashtanga Yoga, says Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada loves to explain things to us. He brings to us all this information. He explains all these different variegated ideas in the Bhagavad Gita. But he always brings us back to this very simple thing. Do the simple thing very strictly. And by following that simple thing properly, with full focus and effort, with diligent effort, we can benefit. We don't have to find all these complicated ways to do things when we have such a simple, guaranteed approach as Krishna consciousness. The last shloka, it says, Bhoktaram yajna tapasam, let me click that for you. Bhoktaram yajna tapasam sarvaloka maheshwaram suhridam sarva bhutanam nyatva mam shantim richati. Shantim, peace, relief from material pangs. A person in full consciousness of me, knowing me to be the ultimate beneficiary of all sacrifices and austerities, the supreme lord of all planets and demigods, and the benefactor and well-wisher of all living entities, attains peace from the pangs of material miseries. So this is the last shloka in this chapter where Prabhupada is wrapping up. And here Prabhupada talks about the great peace formula. He says there's this great peace formula which is there. And he says the greatest peace formula is simply this. Lord Krishna is the beneficiary in all human activities. Men should offer everything to the transcendental service of the Lord because he is the proprietor of all the planets and the demigods thereon. No one is greater than he. He is greater than the greatest of the demigods, Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma. So, under the spell of illusion, living entities are trying to be lords of everything they see, of all they survey. But actually, they are dominated by the material energy of the Lord. The Lord is the master of material nature, and the conditioned souls are under the stringent rule of that material nature. Unless one understands these bare facts, it is not possible to achieve peace in the world, either individually or collectively. So Prabhupada wraps up by saying the eightfold yoga mysticism is automatically practiced in Krishna consciousness because the ultimate purpose of such a yoga is served. What is the ultimate purpose? Attain the supreme. That you'll anyway end up attaining, getting liberation. Anyway, getting liberation. So why work the hard way when you have a simpler, easier process? And that is why he says it is the highest perfection of life. With that, we stop here. That's how the 5th chapter ends. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport of the 5th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavad Gita in the matter of karma yoga or action in Krishna consciousness. So next time we can go into chapter 6, which talks about Dhyan yoga. Then you have that eightfold Ashtanga yoga is being explained. And, he goes on and on about the processes, the methodologies, and Arjuna being Arjuna. I love Arjuna being Arjuna because he does what we would do. He starts to complain, saying, oh, this path is impractical. My mind cannot do it. Mind is restless. How can you expect us to sit and do all this? This is very worrisome. This is very troublesome, this path. And my question to you, having sat and listened to this for the coming chapter, is what do you think Krishna says when Arjuna complains, saying, how is, that his mind is restless? What is Krishna going to say to Arjuna to help him find ways to control that restless mind? And who do you think is the highest type of yogi? Is a person who practices Ashtanga yoga? Is a person who practices Krishna consciousness? Who is the highest type of yogi and what kind of yoga is he doing? Let's find out more about all this as we enter the 6th chapter next time we meet, Krishna willing, and continue these discussions and have this amazing conversation to share. This conversation of the Bhagavad Gita. Just in time, it's around 8:29. We're supposed to stop at 8:30. So thank you so much for your patience. I know I must have bored you somewhere along then that I totally take the blame for it. I am perpetually a student in training. I do lack the qualities my Gurudev has. But please consider that I tried with utmost sincerity to do my best and transfer some of my taste for this reading and the quality of this book to you. If there's anything that you could take away, anything that made you want to open the Gita and learn a little bit more, then it's because of the blessings and mercy of my Gurudev and my Shiksha Guru. It is all credited to them. If there's anything that I made a mistake with, anything that I did wrong, please forgive me. And that would completely be my own faulty nature. So thank you so much for coming today, taking the time out on Kartik Maas to sit and listen to this lecture and, connecting with us. It's been such a pleasure having all of you here. And I will just wrap it up at this point because we're out of time. Did you have any questions? You all good?
No, so good. Thank you. Thank you. So I had a question, right?
Huh?
Very simple question, right?
Sure, sure.
If you go towards chapter end, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's about having consciousness and same time doing karma yoga, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
So the point is, if I have a balance, right? And I'm doing my karma, right? And I have a consciousness on the other side, I have a karma, right? So what's your like? It's like how I balance it, right? Yeah.
Hmm. Well, everybody has to live. We're going to have
Mm-hmm.
to work. We're going to have to take care of ourselves. But
Mm-hmm.
in the process of our living, our
Mm-hmm.
aim and our focus should be trying to incorporate this concept of serving the Lord more and more. Taking good care of yourselves is
Mm-hmm.
necessary if you need to have the ability, mental, physical, financial ability to serve the Lord, right? So in many ways, like if I'm working in an office, right, and I'm earning money, then a portion of that money goes to just maintaining my family, and that's a necessity. That's a basic necessity. Other than that, I'm also spending money in distributing books. I'm cooking for the Lord. I'm investing. I'm paying for
Mm-hmm.
for preparing prashadam. And then sometimes I host devotees in my house. I take them places. I do. All of this is service for the benefit of the Lord. I'm not doing because I'm getting something out of it, right? So do you see
Mm-hmm.
how in our normal lives we are balancing things? And because the effort that we're putting into taking care of our families is also necessary for us to do the service for Krishna, everything slowly over time will all be spiritualized. But for that to happen, he explains again, Srila Prabhupada explains, we must take to the process of Krishna consciousness. We should start following
Mm-hmm.
the regulations of Krishna consciousness, which is a certain way of life, a certain way of eating, living, spending, everything. It's governed and decided by what is the benefit to the Lord. Like we have deities in our house, we spend money, taking care of them. We buy beautiful altars, we buy flowers,
Mm-hmm.
we buy clothes. All that money, it doesn't give us anything, right? It's in the service of the Lord. Slowly, slowly, as we follow this process, more and more of our time, energy, and effort will slowly shift towards Krishna conscious activities. And that is our hope that in the process of growing up, as our children grow and we keep moving, our service, our life becomes more and more spiritualized. And it is a guaranteed process. It doesn't mean that you start today, 10 years from now, you're Krishna conscious, you're up and out. No, that's not what it means. It means that you will at some point finish. But the process is different for different people, depending also on where they're starting from.
Mataji, why I'm telling you is,
Mhm.
I'm from Odisha, so I was in Bhubaneswar airport 2 weeks
Mhm.
back,
Yeah.
and I see like seven folks from European countries. They're
Mhm.
sitting next to me. They're from ISKCON, Bhubaneswar. They're sitting next to
Mhm.
me and just talking about chapter five. You know, and they also kind of discuss that consciousness is the way to go. We do karma, we do. Today I am a bhakta, tomorrow I am a vice president in a company. It's okay,
Yes, yes.
but with a bent of mind. Okay, got it.
Yeah, it's a balancing act. You got it. You actually got the crux of it. But then remember, the balancing act has to be balanced years and years. It takes long time. So when you come to Dhyana Yoga chapter 6, right? And
Mm,
Arjuna's complaining, and then Krishna will say, it takes time. It also is regulation, right?
yeah.
Look at how he says you have to live a regulated life. Control the senses. Make sure that you don't deviate yourself. Keep your activities as much as possible within the confines of service of the Lord. And because of that, we say we choose your association, right? We talk
Mhm.
about that in the processes. We say, what kind of people do we associate with? What kind of activities do we choose to do? Where do we choose to spend our money, our time, and our energy? All that defines how well balanced our life is in Krishna consciousness. So it's always a balancing act. But it's wonderful you're even thinking about it and you're working your way through it, because that means that it's already effective for you.
Yeah,
Already,
yeah.
and that's so wonderful in itself. So it's great.
No, thank you, Mataji. Thank you.
Thank you so much for asking questions. I'm very grateful. So we will
Thank you.
stop here. We'll wrap it up. Thank you so much for coming and joining. Hare Krishna, and we'll see you next Wednesday.
Yes,
A
only
happy Kartik.
chapter 6. Happy
Yes,
Kartik.
chapter 6. Whenever I come back, we are on rotation, so I'll be back. Yeah.
Thank you.
Happy Kartik. Do light those lamps, the ghee lamps. Don't forget. One for
Yeah,
every day, the minimum, and have a wonderful Kartik.
thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.